back to Bright Lights Beyond.
Did you miss us?
You better have, because we're back and we're here to stay.
And if you didn't miss us, you will miss us now. But not anytime in the next couple of months, because we will be here.
There we go. I'm like, yes. She's right about that.
Yeah.
Well, welcome back, you guys.
So we're so excited to be back. If this is your first time listening to Bright Lights Beyond, just know that you're in for a wild ride. Here we typically talk about near-death experiences and a lot of things relating to death. But we are so happy if you're returning with us again. We had a really great response to the first season, and so we were like, we have to do something. We have to kind of like make it work. Stretch it out and like see what else we have to explore.
We're prolonging, absolutely. And you know what? Like you were saying about the viewership and just like the great response, like it was just so fun doing it and so amazing to learn about near-death experiences. And that's something that we still are totally looking into and would love. If you have had a near-death experience, like I've said 1,000 times before, please contact us. We still want to hear from you. But I'm excited to announce that this season is going to be a little bit different, you know, still in the same vein, but a little bit different than last season.
If you think about it in terms of branding, think of season 1 as Bright Lights Beyond, but think of season 2 as Bright Lights Beyond the Grave. Ooh. We're getting spooky. Did you get goosebumps?
I did. And if you didn't, then you're desensitized.
Yeah.
And you should see a therapist. So it's season 2, Bright Lights Beyond the Grave. We just thought, you know, in speaking about near-death experiences, we brought such a positive lens to the thought of, you know, death and coming back and like what that brings to our life, that we thought looking into what happens after you actually die and looking at it through a positive lens and something that can, you know, teach us a lesson would also be super great. So that's kind of the foundation of why we wanted to do Beyond the Grave. On top of that, we just want to explore more paranormal, you know, entity type stuff. So that's why we're doing this season. And I'm super excited. Like I said previously, if you have a near-death experience, we still want to talk to you. But this season, we're going to be talking more about what happens like after you actually die.
And what's so interesting about this particular topic is like, when we talk about near-death experiences, it is something that we're also theorizing in various communities, whether it's religious, scientific, any type of like spiritualness. It's all pretty much still theorized. But this is even more because it truly is what it's individual, what you believe. And I think it's going to be cool to kind of explore how different cultures view afterlife and what what everybody thinks happens after you die, specifically like to your body, to your spirit, and to all the cool and creepy things in between.
I totally agree with you. And you know, the more we learn about what happens in the afterlife, the more we can see how important these near-death experiences are and how they're so related. So I'm just super excited to just like go more into this like world of like the paranormal and the phenomena. So I'm just really excited. And I hope you guys are too. Bright Lights Beyond the Grave, season 2, best thing we've ever done.
Yeah.
Put it on your book bag. I don't know what you put it on nowadays, but put it somewhere.
Yeah. Note it. There will be a quiz.
No.
We're not bringing up quizzes again.
Honestly, the thing is like if there's a quiz, it will be, you know, it will be in episode 3. So if there's a quiz, not saying there is one, but if there is one.
And if there is at this point, it's going to be a pop quiz. So we will not be reminding you.
Yeah, we won't remind you. And in this time, if you fail, it's done.
You're dead. You're beyond the grave.
Yeah, you're beyond the grave, girl, if you can't get this.
So something that I'm actually really curious about is you have a near-death experience, right? Does anybody else within the near-death experience that besides the person who's nearly dying?
Okay, so insane you brought that up because this brings us to something that in the scientific world and also in the paranormal world called a shared death experience. Anecdotal evidence suggests that some loved ones and caregivers of dying patients undergo a type of end-of-life phenomenon known as shared death experiences, or an SDE, whereby one feels that one has participated in dying person's transition to a post-mortem existence. So that's kind of like the red tape of like what it is scientifically in SDE. And a lot of times it's like medical professionals, especially like during the early days that this was being researched. It was medical professionals and people who were caregiving that would be at the end of life of these patients, and they would maybe feel like they were also dying and ascending or seeing like an orb float out of these bodies. It also can happen to people who have dreams about maybe a dying loved one or someone, and they wake up and that person, they get a phone call like, hey, this person did pass on. So it is very kind of lucid in the way that it is. This original type of like terminology really was coined after 1975, and there was a PhD and an MD, doctor and professor, Raymond Moody, who wrote this book in 75 called Life After Life. And it was basically an exploration of all these different near-death experiences. When he went back to medical school, he was struck by the number of people who had said that they had had these shared death experiences, where they had been in the room with a patient who, was dying, and they saw them physically like float up, and they also flew up, but they came back down. And so it was really hard for people to explain. But what was crazy when Raymond was talking about this is he was like, these were medical professionals that were telling me this, which is something is so contrary to like what we believe. Like, okay, if you're a science person, you definitely don't believe this, like you're going to debunk it. But he was like, no, these doctors were coming up to me and telling me this stuff. And he gave an explanation of why it may happen to a lot more medical professionals. And it's because if you think about it, especially back in the day, they didn't want family members being in there with the deceased person. They thought medical people can handle it. They're around this all the time. It'll totally mess up the people that have to see it. And so reason they have a lot of evidence is happening to medical people is because they're normally there, in the last moments of people's death. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was so crazy that you may not even be dying at all. And you can somehow like see death or watch their spirit pass on or have a dream about someone else passing on. Just so crazy.
I think it's so interesting that it's very visual too, because like obviously when a human dies, their body changes, like their coloring changes and things like that, but this isn't that. It's almost like they're leaving their bodies, so they're like focusing on the specter part of it, or like the not necessarily a ghost, but kind of
but kind of they're no longer alive and they physically watch them. What I thought was so crazy is that sometimes people will also feel like their spirits will also lift up as this other person. Maybe they're holding their grandpa's hand or something, and it's so crazy that there's a term for it. Like, who would have ever thought that, beside the NDE, that there's an SDE where it's like you don't have to go through any of it and you watch somebody pass on. And I also think it's really crazy is that along with these dreams people have, sometimes people will physically feel pain. When I was doing some research, there was this lady whose mom actually passed, but she had gotten really ill. This is before like cell phones were a thing, and she didn't know her mom had passed, but she had gotten ill the day before around the same exact time her mom passed. And it's like a physical response that some people feel tethered, and it's like letting them know that they've passed on, kind of.
Yeah, that's so interesting. It kind of fits in that twin mentality where they feel each other when they're not even near each other. So there's some kind of connection. I'm so curious if that connection is something that is made, obviously, because with medical professionals, they don't know these people.
Right.
So I wonder what it's tied to, because it's obviously not tied to like knowing that person or being a twin of that person, but it's got to be something.
It's so true, because a lot of times your doctor may know you, or the person who's operating for surgery may know you, but they don't really know you. I think part of it is like in hospitals and different places where death is like not looming, but could be a heavy presence, that there is something spiritual about those places. I know that in several different hospitals, like, in different countries, there are different wives' tales being told about, what, deities or gods are around those different areas. And I do think that there's an elevated sense of something happening. And it's almost like a church in a way, where it's like a sanctuary of some sort. So kind of on that realm of like spiritual hospitals and different like places where death happens, there was a study book published by a professor named William Barrett, and his wife was a nurse who worked at a labor nurse. And he wrote this book called Deathbed Visions. And it basically was talking about like what the patient goes through as they're dying and what it does to the people who are around them. And he said that every time his wife would come home and say like, hey, we lost someone through childbirth, because this was, 1860s, like who knows? Childbirth in general is so scary, but like back then, I mean, come on. Yeah. That's like terrifying. He was saying that every time she would come home and talk about it, there were some times that she would literally say that she physically like would hear them say like, oh, I'm coming, or here it is, and see physically like life leave bodies. Wow. And Barrett said that this had a profound effect on the way that she kind of like moved through life and saw different things. But it happened so many times that she was truly convinced that like, something is definitely out there and that they are being welcomed into the afterlife, which I think is beautiful to think about.
I was going to say, that is such a beautiful thing, and almost kind of like coming to peace with something like that.
Yes, they're like aware. And so that's something that I think is super cool. Like they're aware that something's happening. Yeah.
So that's kind of like, do you know what terminal lucidity is?
Ooh, okay. What is that?
So terminal lucidity is basically that period of time. So say you're in a coma, right? Mm-hmm. And then you wake up from the coma and you're like absolutely 100% mentally there. Mm-hmm. And then it's like a moment of time that happens before you pass away, that you're like completely there. So the technical definition of it is an unexpected return of mental clarity and memory, or sudden regained consciousness that occurs in the time shortly before death in patients. So it's almost like that same thing where there's like a clarity where if they say something like, oh, I see the light, or they like have those moments where it's like, they're with us the last time before they're not.
Yeah.
That's so interesting.
Oh my gosh. Wow, that's really beautiful. Like to think that, I wonder if they know in that moment, like when they gain this clarity, like do they know that like soon they're going to be like, and they're just trying to bring peace to the people around them? That's super cool.
Yeah, that you saying that just made me think that it is probably the biggest blessing you can give a family member that's around you, to be able to, because a lot of times if you're like, you have family surrounding you and you pass, you often hear that they don't get that like cinematic goodbye with family members. So this is almost something that is probably so lovely in a weird way,
totally,
to have that with somebody before they pass.
Oh my gosh, that is so beautiful. And it's so cool that there's like a term for it. I love that. So
we have so much to talk about.
I'm just so happy that you guys are here to share this journey with us. And like we always say, kind of, this is a very heavy topic. Death is not something that is talked about lightly. Like it's it's a forever thing, but at the same time, maybe not in our mortal bodies, but I think that like death can be looked at in a beautiful way, and grief is a part of life, but so is living, and there's lessons to be learned in everything. So I'm just thankful that you guys are listening, and I know it's a hard topic, but I think that we can bring a little bit of clarity and some type of mysticism around something that's like super mystical and no one knows, but like something that is traditionally hard to deal with. It totally is, but like maybe some levity to it, because we're still living, like we're still here.
Yeah, I also love the lore around the paranormal. Like it's so funny, you think about paranormal stuff as like scary, but you don't think of it as morbid.
Right.
It's either like really exciting. Like, okay, so I have a statistic to share with you. So a recent one poll on behalf of Groupon polled a bunch of people and found that 60% believe that they have seen a ghost.
Wow.
So that means like a lot of people feel that kind of, presence.
Right.
But it's never in like I'm going to cry, I'm sad. Well, most of the time. Unless you're like talking with a medium, or you're talking with someone specifically about maybe somebody in your life, that can be, very personal.
Hard,
but if it's just like a general thing, we go to haunted houses because we want to be spooked. So I just think it's funny that like we talk about death as something almost separate than the paranormal part of it.
And it shouldn't be, because they're one and the same.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a beautiful way of putting it. And so that's why we're doing this season. And that's why we're going to, we're going to take you guys on a journey, and we're all going to learn. We're going to learn about different cultures and, their death practices, but also the paranormal and like spirits. And I'm just super excited. Like this is going to be so fun. Which leads me to our call to action.
Yes.
Which is, if you or a loved one or somebody you know has experienced some type of paranormal phenomena in terms of ghost, afterlife, if you've had a shared death experience, anything like that, if there's something that you want to talk about or you have somebody who would be great to talk about in terms of like crossing over and helping people bridge that gap, please reach out to us. You guys know our freaking Instagram, you know our freaking website, so just reach out. We want to hear from you.
And since that statistic, we believe every single statistic that we read. So 60% of you have seen a ghost.
100%.
And 100% of 60% of you have seen a ghost. So we want to hear your stories. We want spooky, lovely, just interesting stories. So please write in. We can have you call in. We can have you in the studio with us.
Absolutely.
We want to hear from you.
We want to hear from you. This is what makes it fun, because me and Marina, we can sit here and look at each other all day, but without you guys, it would just be two freaks talking about spooky things. And we want, I don't know.
Sometimes I don't break eye contact with her because we're the only two people in here. So we need you.
We need you.
So yeah, we are so happy again to have you back with us. And while we are shifting our, conversation a little bit, it's going to be just as fun. Actually, we'll probably be able to make it a little more story-based because there's so many, of course, like NDEs, people have like very cool stories, but, it's like kind of ghost stories from around the world, basically, or like, just interesting stuff. So please stick around with us over the next 6 episodes. We'll be talking to people. We will be talking about different cultures and their afterlife beliefs and just a lot of fun stuff in between. So
stick around.
Stick around.
And as always, live life beyond
the grave.